The one thing that is the genesis of Nokia is the ability to reinvent ourselves. Bell Labs works for the world. The world wouldn't exist without Bell Labs as we see today. You're right, transistor was invented there, the wave theory of matter, solar cells, wireless networks, you name it. See, Unix, big bet is topological quantum computing. Quantum computing, as many may have think that has existed recently, is a 100-year-old phenomenon. It was 100 years ago when in Solvay conference quantum computing was accepted, and even before that by Schrodinger. I believe we have some of the best methodology to make this real in the next decade. So build companies, incubate, license, all of these methodologies. We are looking at how do we give the world a chance to get a sniff at what we produce at Bell Labs. And I believe the opportunity is limitless.
Hi, everyone. This is the TechSurge Deep Tech Podcast presented by Celesta Capital. Each episode, we spotlight issues and voices at the intersection of emerging technologies, company building, and venture investment. I am Sriram Viswanathan, founding managing partner at Celesta Capital. If you enjoy TechSurge, now is a perfect time to hit the like and subscribe button. And while you're at it, you can leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. If you're just discovering us, visit techsurgepodcast.com to sign up for our newsletter and check out the archive of some very interesting past episodes. Today, we're exploring the intersection of telecommunications, innovation strategy, venture development, and all kinds of things that are hardcore deep tech with my dear friend, Nishant Batra. Nishant is the Chief Strategy and Technology Officer at Nokia, and of course, a big-time veteran in telecom space with long tenures in leadership and executive management at Ericsson and Pioneer and Nokia itself. At Nokia, Nishant, you have a very interesting role overseeing everything from technology architecture to the research that happens in Nokia Bell Labs and really driving Nokia's investment strategy, which is what Nokia Growth Partners, NGP, is part of, and they all report to you. So you have obviously a wide band of responsibilities and experiences. So I'm really delighted to have this conversation with you. So welcome to TechSurge. It's a pleasure to have you on this podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here, Sriram.
So this is, Nokia is a very storied company. And for people that don't know it, it really started out in the 1800s as a shoe company and, evolved over time from in Finland and grew to be a telecommunication powerhouse in the prior generation, right? So in the pre-iPhone era, Nokia was the one everybody was shooting against because, you had such an amazing technology capability in the 2G, 3G space. And some would argue that even at the early stages of 4G, you still had some presence and you were known as the company that brought mobile telephony to the masses. And there's lots that's been written about Nokia's decline because of iPhone and all that. But putting that aside, what people don't really appreciate is that Nokia actually is the powerhouse behind most of the cellular networks because you power the back-end infrastructure. So can you talk about what are the types of technologies that Nokia really is doubling down on, over the years and more so now? In the world, which is evolving to 5G and beyond, what is Nokia's presence from a technology standpoint in the back end of the network?
So today, if you think about, Nokia, you're right. We've had our highs and lows. The one thing that is the genesis of Nokia is the ability to reinvent ourselves. If you think of, we were the first original hyperscaler in the tech world. The global market share of Nokia handset devices, to your earlier point, was 40% plus. You don't see that in many industries. And globally, we were the powerhouse. But then the low came when we got disrupted. We didn't really see the hardware-software separation as early. We didn't really look at consumer experience versus technology gain.
In a way, you would say that started with the advent of BlackBerry.
BlackBerry, and then really accentuated by the iPhone.
Yeah.
Because that whole mindset of you don't have to really drive to what the consumer wants. You have to drive the consumer to what you think they may want. Nokia sort of was missing that, right? But then look at the expeditious recovery, right? It really came through consolidation of the telecom industry on the network side. And today we operate broadly in 4 business lines. The first business line is wireless networks. We're the second largest supplier in the space outside China. And then if you look at
This is the core of the network, or
this is radio access network.
Right.
Then if you look at fixed networks, which is broadband access over fiber to your house, we are the largest in the world today. And practically, if you were to order broadband, there is this high likelihood that you would get Nokia at your house. Then the third area is software, where we're looking at both telecom and enterprise software. That's a smaller but a very successful business for us. And then the final piece is, this is also not very well known, just pure technology. We are the second largest licensors in the world of technology. So we build a lot of cellular technology. We also build a lot of audiovisual technology. We build a lot of device technology. All of this are licensed to all the big device manufacturers in the world, like Apple, Samsung. They use our technology, and we work together with them.
And by that, you mean really the IP licensing?
It's the IP licensing.
So in a way, between you, Nokia, Ericsson, and Qualcomm, the triumvirate of IP licensing, especially in the telecom area, is between the three of you. But in Nokia, you have more than just telecom, is kind of what that you're alluding to.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, so if you look at the technology licensing space, especially for cellular, you're absolutely right. Qualcomm, Nokia, Ericsson, and then there is InterDigital. And then there are smaller players. But if you look at the technology portfolio that we offer when we license, it's not just cellular. We are one of the largest patent holders of H.264 compression technology.
Video compression.
Yes. We have won 2 Emmy Awards as Nokia because of audio-video innovations that we have brought to life. So we offer a lot more than just standard essential patents on cellular.
So this is again, we're in the part of the conversation where I really want to dig into the evolution of the wireless industry itself. And obviously lots has been talked about the evolution from 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G. And in fact, we ourselves have actually done an episode with Dr. Andrea Goldschmidt in one of the earlier episodes where we went into the details of that evolution. But from the Nokia standpoint, just paint the picture of, you've got all these varying business lines all the way from the RAN, the software piece, the devices, which you obviously got out of, you have the IP, and then you have the software ecosystem that you're really enabling. How important is it that these technologies that you're building conform to the old model of the telecom industry, which is no longer valid, as you know. It's all changed, thanks to iPhone, and it's really horizontalized, if you will. So what is it that you would bring to the table that a competitive response cannot do better? Whether it's coming from Qualcomm or Ericsson or others, the rules of the game have completely changed.
Yeah.
Right? So how are you adapting to this new world? Think of it as, the post-Apple world versus the pre-Apple world.
Yeah.
How is your strategy and the technologies that you focus on changed in this transition?
Now, we have been successful at some and less successful at others. What really the iPhone did, it brought a big tsunami of mobile data. So if you look at the generations of technology, in 2G, that was a voice technology. It was meant to connect people to be able to talk wirelessly. Then from 2G to 3G, there was a lot of conversation around that we were going to bring mobile data, really GSM going to GPRS and Edge, and then to wideband CDMA as 3G. You may remember some of these acronyms, right? They're now 20 years old or longer, actually. So can we put data on mobile? And there were very interesting innovations like the WAP gateway. The world was still thinking of applications that your service provider will offer to you. So you buy a subscription, they will give you 5 applications that they've hosted for you. That's what you should use. What iPhone did, the biggest breakthrough, they said, you don't have to restrict yourself to the applications that are offered to you by your provider. Here's an app store. You can use any application you would like as long as it's on the app store. And they all were over the top. That meant that the wireless carrier itself became a means versus an end.
Right.
The walled garden was brought down by the iPhone. What that did was it created such a tsunami of data because now new applications, the world started thinking in terms of apps and using uplink, downlink data. And that's just continues, right? And the technology had to then pivot from, okay, we're going to connect for voice to just deliver a bunch of data. Between 4G and then 5G, every generation, we bring down the cost per bit by more than 10x. Right? So if you look at over generations, the amount of data that has been consumed is massive. You now consume, as a consumer, somewhere between 5 and 10 gigs a month, versus what you were consuming was 5 megs about 10 years back. So, and by the way, you're able to afford it. You're not paying 1,000 times.
Right.
Imagine if you were to be told that, hey, now you're going to pay 1,000 times, a $40 plan will become a $40,000 plan. The world would not have gotten connected.
Right.
And that innovation is what this industry has brought to the world. Right. We have continuously pushed the limits of physics and electronics to bring down the cost per bit.
But how has this benefited Nokia?
This is where we have been as an industry less than successful. Because what happens then, the carriers, our biggest customers, they have been basically serving the world. Their service revenues have gone up, so have ours, but nowhere in proportion to the benefit that we have offered.
True, but I guess you can also say nowhere to the benefit that some folks in the ecosystem are getting.
Yeah.
Relative to what you're getting, because you've moved the technology puck, if you will,
yes,
to the RAN and to the network.
Yeah.
Because you're not in the device.
No.
And so most of the value is accruing to the guy that is at the edge in margin dollars. Would you agree?
The value appropriation, as a consequence, actually have happened in 2 areas. Is on the application domain.
Right.
The Facebooks and the Instagrams or the Googles of the world have appropriated most of the value, to their credit, because connectivity became easy. Yeah. And so whether you're basically looking at Reels on Instagram or TikTok, that would have not been possible if our industry hadn't served them. But the value appropriation didn't come to the industry, it went over the top. And then the other place the value appropriation has happened is, to your point, the endpoints, the device. And not just the device, the whole ecosystem that Apple's been able to produce.
And Samsung and the Android ecosystem. So tell me, you have Huawei, you have Ericsson, you guys are there, and Samsung, and maybe there are a bunch of other smaller players. So are those the players that you tussle with for a share of the market segment for the core of the network or the RAN of the network?
On the RAN, the predominantly, if you look at in the US, is Ericsson, Nokia, and Samsung.
Right.
Most of the world, there is also the prevalence of Huawei, but now less so because of the geopolitical divisions the world has seen.
Sure.
So, for example, in India, we see a lot of Ericsson, some Samsung. In Japan, we see a lot of Ericsson, some Samsung. We also see Samsung, of course, excessively in Korea, and they've done very well there, to their credit. So, main competitors,
Ericsson and Samsung.
Ericsson, Samsung, and Huawei. Huawei is still extremely successful as a company, and they have very good position actually in Southeast Asia and Latin America. They have a very good position in Europe. So a lot of credit to them that they have continued to do well. But these are the players. We also see ZTE from China, and we see them mostly in Southeast Asia, Latin America. And now there are, over the last few years, there were a lot of smaller players. They were behind this open RAN phenomenon. they have not been as successful in the industry.
So let's talk about Open RAN for a second. So explain what is Open RAN, and more specifically, there's a lot of talk about how AI can actually potentially help in the deployment and development of Open RAN itself. Can you touch on that and explain what that is?
Yeah. So if you look at radio access networks, open and AI are not synonymous. Yeah. There are three phenomena that are happening in RAN and simultaneously: open, cloud, and AI. What open meant was a bunch of interfaces defined by a certain consortia, saying that these interfaces are open. That means we can interrupt between different providers. The most key was called the lower layer split. So when we deploy a base station, there's something that goes on the base of the tower, which is where the compute sits. It's called the baseband, and something that goes on the top of the tower, which is called the radio access, which is the radio frequency. That's the RF. And when you connect both of them, there's an interface. And that interface was envisioned to be open in Open RAN as the most dominant requirement from Open RAN. There are other parts of Open RAN that you could also open up towards the northbound orchestration and so on and so forth. So about opening up of interfaces to allow for innovation in different parts of the system separately. There's a phenomenon also called Cloud RAN, which is basically putting the compute of the wireless network instead of bare metal ASIC on cloudified basically servers. That means you could get a commercial off-the-shelf server, and then you could basically put the workload on it and connect it to a radio.
So we just pause there for a second. So let's just for the not so technical in the audience. So in the cellular infrastructure on the tower, on the base of the tower, there's the baseband infrastructure.
Yeah.
And at the top of the tower, you have the antenna, and you have the radio access network, and you have the RF, all in the top of the tower.
Yes.
And there's compute capability at the base of the tower that's actually not only processing the radio traffic, but it's also managing the applications that are coming into that tower from the various devices.
No. In most cases, when you actually build a network, now this is a little bit complicated. I'll try to break it down. In most cases, we build something called a distributed RAN. What that means is that the tower sits on a isolated location. At the base of the tower is a computer, and that is basically called a baseband. Correct. It is only processing, in most cases, just the application for wireless, for radio access. There's no other application. Then on top of the tower is also computer, but it is pre-built into a radio, which is RF. And then on top of that, there's an antenna, which actually does the transceive from an analog point of view. The computer on the base of the tower, when you put it on the commercial off-the-shelf server, then it is cloudified, because you can actually then compartmentalize or basically cloudify different workloads there. Yes. So that's Cloud RAN. You could also break the application on the base of the tower up into something we call a central unit and distributed unit. And you could put some of that application actually into a cloud data center. It doesn't have to be in the base of the tower as long as it's near enough. Because if you put it too far, then you have latency losses. And latency losses actually impact the spectral efficiency. You don't get as much out of the spectrum. So that's cloudification of the RAN. The third phenomenon is AI RAN, which you just mentioned. It's a phenomenon that has really been talked about in the last 18 to 24 months. Is then at the base of the tower, that computer I talked about, today is built, most of the networks are built on bare metal ASIC. When you cloudify it, that phenomenon was to take it towards a CPU. When you take it towards a GPU architecture, that means you use GPU as an accelerator versus an ASIC, then it becomes AI RAN. So three different phenomenons. Opening up the network for different parts of the network to evolve separately and interop, ORAN. Cloudification using CPUs, Cloud RAN. There are leading operators in the world who have actually adopted that technology called Cloud RAN. Verizon being case in point have done well there. AI RAN is a technology that's been more talked about recently. And we don't have a commercial deployment of AI RAN yet. But there's a lot of now exploration going on in the industry that can this really truly help the wireless workload as well? Can we get more out of the spectrum? There is another aspect, and I think you briefly went there. if there is an opportunity to put more applications on that computer, and that make that a multi-service and multi-application computer, then cloudification and AIification really helps. And does it help always on the tower? No, but at times you can put a wireless network on the edge. When you put it on the edge, let's take an example. You go to a mine, and the mine has connectivity needs. Actually, mine is a very good example because it's a tough environment for the Wi-Fi kind of environments to exist. So cellular does very well. Cellular is very robust in that sense. You put a cellular network in a mine. Now the mine wants to have multiple acceleration applications on the edge. They can then say, on the same computer, I could put RAN as an application. I could host other applications, maybe surveillance, maybe productivity applications.
Security.
And by the way, mining has a very, very important coordination between the different parts of the mine, and they could put applications related to that. And for example, at Bell Labs, we have researched on something called cognitive digital mine. That application could sit on the same edge. And then you have a multi-application hosted server. That's where cloudification and AIification really prove the point.
So that's very helpful. Thank you. So what you're essentially saying is that as these technologies in telecommunications evolve to becoming more complex networks, from 2G, 3G, 4G, and 5G and beyond, there's an opportunity for really fragmenting the entire architecture of the telecommunications network and look for innovative opportunities in each of the segments, if you will. And as more applications and workloads come about, you could make a decision about moving some of those things closer to the edge. You can move some of it to the cloud, and you can actually have an overarching architecture on how you can be protected from getting disrupted. If you are the provider of technology, you have many touch points of innovation that you can focus on.
Yeah.
And so from Nokia's standpoint, what is your biggest, as you're competing against Ericsson and Samsung and Huawei and others, how are you differentiating yourself? Because everybody is, in an open world, it's hard to differentiate, right?
Yeah. Let me correct you one place. I actually don't subscribe to the fragmentation as much. The radio access ecosystem is complex. Right. Multiple frequencies, network management, baseband layer. I believe having a systemic view of radio access is the right approach. Otherwise, when you start breaking it down, then somebody else has to put it together for you. Yes. And that becomes quite expensive because then you're asking your customer saying, hey, you become the system integrator. Yeah. Not always appropriate. In some cases, maybe, but you want the systemic view. What you do want to do is where the opportunity offers itself for multi-application hosting, especially in large enterprises, you offer the same infra for multi-application hosting. That opportunity is brilliant, by the way, and more around private networks. On public macro networks, if there is a tower, which I can see from the window here, if there's a tower, how many enterprises are going to put application on the base of the tower? Yeah. Not many. Yeah. There's not really a need for creating a very wholesome computer at the base of the tower. Right. But at the edge of the enterprise, starts to get exciting. Yeah. So the radio access system has to be, in my belief, kept together because otherwise the verification costs go through the roof. Yeah. But opening the network to allow other applications to be co-hosted at the edge of the enterprise, brilliant. Yeah. Now, we also have to keep in mind that we have to keep on top of how these technologies on the silicon side improve. Today, most of the networks are built on bare metal ASIC. We have to see how the CPU and the GPU and the NPU
bare metal
technologies.
ASIC, just for the benefit of the audience, it's just general purpose ASIC.
No, it's not general purpose. An ASIC is a hardened device which only can do the application is supposed to do. Yeah.
It's not a general purpose, but it's specific to a particular
wireless
function.
Application. Yeah. So when we do an ASIC, it only carries that function. Yeah. But then we have to keep an eye if general technologies like a graphic processor unit or a CPU or even a neural processing unit starts to get really good power and thermal and advantages on acceleration, we are keeping an eye out to all of those. Should we move from an ASIC to that? Yeah. Which is better? For now, we have felt till date the ASIC does a very, very good job because we specify what we need in terms of hardware accelerators. But we're keeping an eye on all of these. We have also been very open to, in the cases I've talked about, cloudifying and opening it for other applications. There we have put the radio access stack on a general purpose CPU.
Got it. So going back to my question on just the overall market segment sort of picture between the four of you, Samsung, Qualcomm, Nokia, and Ericsson, and perhaps Huawei as well. How does it shake out in terms of market segment share between the various players?
So if you look, and we like to look at the market share outside China. Outside China, because we don't really have access to that market as much as we used to.
Right.
Outside China, Nokia carries a market share somewhere around 25 to 27%. And Ericsson is bigger than us. And Huawei is about the same size. And that's how the market
And Samsung is a little smaller.
Samsung's relatively smaller than both of us. And then there's ZT that rounds the 5 out.
So this is a good transition point for me, because what you have as Nokia is a crown jewel that some of the others don't have.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm referring to, which is Nokia Bell Labs.
Yeah.
And Bell Labs has had a unbelievable history, from the Ma Bell days of AT&T to Lucent to Alcatel Lucent to then finally, Nokia buying Alcatel Lucent. In sort of a roundabout way, you ended up owning Bell Labs, and Bell Labs is just this crucible of innovation and truly a remarkable place for all kinds of technologies to come about. I mean, there's a long list all the way from semiconductors to laser to radio to information theory to the universe and all of that, the Big Bang and everything came out of that. So now it turns out that, Bell Labs reports to you. So talk about, what does that mean? I mean, how, Bell Labs is this amazing place of researchers and scientists. How are you looking at that as a, arrow in your quiver to really drive an advantage for Nokia from the market standpoint, versus really, nurturing it as a place of deep research, almost at a national security level? It's highly, highly important. So how do you think about it? You're a Finnish company with a crown jewel in the U.S., having built all of these technologies. So talk about Bell Labs.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's such a, by the way, I don't ever say that Bell Labs works for me. Bell Labs works for the world. The world wouldn't exist without Bell Labs as we see today. You're right. Transistor was invented there, the wave theory of matter, solar cells, wireless networks, you name it. C, Unix, C++,
C, Kernighan Ritchie.
Yeah.
We've all read and studied books from people that worked at Bell Labs.
Yeah, so we recently had the Bell Labs Centennial event, where Bell Labs, we celebrated 100 years of Bell Labs last month. And there was a little bit of a debate, what's the best innovation that Bell Labs has seen? And there was a lot of people. There were 4 Nobel Prize laureates in that audience. There were 5 Turing Award winners. One of the most celebrated technocrats in the world, Eric Schmidt, was there with us. He said, in his opinion, C is the most important innovation coming out of Bell Labs. He himself worked on Lex at Bell Labs as an intern. So a bunch of things coming out of Bell Labs, right? Now, what Bell Labs has been very successful, and by the way, Bell Labs is not only American, because Bell Labs has grown overseas under Alcatel Lucent and then Nokia. But we have actually 12 sites of Bell Labs around the world. The headquarters of Bell Labs is proudly in New Jersey. We actually announced that we would move from Murray Hill campus, which has been around for more than 50 years now. We would actually move that campus to New Brunswick. And we've worked very, very closely with the state of New Jersey to do that. We're even actually now putting a venture studio together with the state of New Jersey and NJEDA, who have been great partners to us. So what we have started to think about, there's a lot part of Bell Labs which is used in the products that Nokia produces, and it gives us differentiators. When 5G was coming along, and now as we work towards 6G, there's a lot of concepts that we will now put into the 6G standardization, which will come out of Bell Labs. Right? And this is how we try to keep an edge in the, I'll give you another example. We've talked wireless a lot, fixed networks, optical networks. there is something called probability constellation shaping, which is sort of the essence of how these networks work, was invented at Bell Labs. Passive optical networks, we are always ahead, whether it's gigabit PON to 10 gig PON to 20 gig PON to 100 gig PON. So Bell Labs, it keeps helping the base business in a big way. That's one aspect of Bell Labs. We call it core, Bell Labs core. Then we call Bell Labs applied. We call it Bell Labs applied and solutions. They work on more horizontals. There is technologies like AI, quantum that we are working on. In this segment of Bell Labs, and even in core, we actually have, while we invented the transistor, which is basically the backbone of the digital economy today, we actually made a couple of $1,000s out of that. So what we have started to do in partnership with you guys, for example, is to look at when we invent something, is there a field of use that we will not, be focused on as a comms company? And then we can say, can we spin that technology off?
Your vision
Yeah.
is that as Bell Labs comes up with all of these fundamental research, there are areas where the research actually lends itself to very long-term sort of potential, 10, 20 year plus. Quantum computing may be in that category.
Yeah, maybe longer.
Maybe longer. But artificial intelligence is in a different area, or maybe radio on glass, new substrates, new materials. How are you thinking about, I know that we're going to talk about, what Celesta is doing with Nokia itself, but even without that effort that we've got going, you must have a much larger sort of an objective of commercializing and monetizing all this research. How are you thinking about that?
So again, the core part lends it to, so when we look at wireless, fixed broadband, etc., roadmaps 5 to 10 years.
So that goes back to the core of the business. You monetize it through your products and services from the core of the business.
Correct.
But so there are areas that you're working on some new things.
Right, new things. So either it could then be a new business for the company, or we have actually launched even an internal incubator. The internal incubator now takes it from research to a POC. And that starts to create, what can we do? Should we keep the technology, spin it out? That mindset we have started to produce. Because researchers want to make sure that they do, this is one thing about Bell Labs I've learned, Sriram. They want to do best research for the betterment of the world. This is Bell Labs in an essence. Now, how do you commercialize is not often obvious. That's why internal incubator is a very important one. We have launched a venture studio. We're going to put a few incubations through the venture studio with the state of New Jersey. We've created partnerships such as the one we have today between Celesta and us. So we are looking at all avenues of commercializing. Now, of course, there is an avenue of licensing. That could also be the case. And we've done that in some cases. I'll give you an innovation where we just licensed. So you drive a nice car and it has something called a heads-up display. When you drive on the display, there is something that you see in terms of what is the speed that you're driving at and what's the speed limit that you're on. It's on the pane of glass that you're looking at, right? We have built a cheaper and a better way to do that, which has nothing to do with comms. We just license the technology to a partner and say, go build heads-up display in the automotive sector. We will just license it to you. We had a technology for data center cooling. Came out of our optical labs. Now, data center cooling is massive these days. I mean, it's the thing, right? And we built a phase 2 cooling methodology. We just licensed it to a company and said, you guys go monitor it. We just licensed it. So build companies, incubate, license, all of these methodologies. We are looking at how do we give the world a chance to get a sniff at what we produce at Bell Labs. And I believe the opportunity is limitless. Because when you start looking at what Bell Labs does, you walk one corridor and you come out with 20 ideas. And actually, if you go to that building, you don't even know how many corridors are doing what. So it's limitless.
So, in a way, in the old days, Park, Xerox Park was that place where everybody sort of went to do cutting edge research. And Bell Labs obviously had that. Do you think that Bell Labs has the same sort of, draw for leading edge researchers that want to do work on AI or next generation materials or semiconductors or any of it, do you see that them coming to Bell Labs, or would they rather go to an OpenAI or a Google?
West Coast? Yeah.
Yeah, because there's a different dynamic, right? So,
fully agree. Now, the answer is yes and no.
Yeah.
For anybody who wants to pursue in life in research, industrial research, we get the top dibs because they want to be part of industrial research.
Right.
Anybody wants to be part of commercializing and creating value economy out of it.
Yeah.
We don't get the first dibs.
Right. Is that an objective, or is that a deliberate choice of not wanting that? What are you optimizing for?
It is. I wouldn't say it's deliberate. If we had a choice, because see, Bell Labs used to be part of a monopolistic organization called AT&T, right? And then the funds were limitless, and the objectives were, very, very broad. Yeah. And of course, when you're not in that shape, you have to then focus and really see where you want to be in, right? So some of that has impacted what Bell Labs used to be under the AT&T banner, right? Before 1984. Then it has, of course, evolved Alcatel-Lucent, then Alcatel-Lucent, then Nokia. So it is not the same Bell Labs as it was 40 years ago. We have to acknowledge that. But if you ask a top PhD graduate from a top university that you want to go learn and do research, they will show up at Bell Labs any day of the year. When we look at our summer intern program, and I engage with them actively, we are so selective. We are looking at 50 to 100 interns that will basically come and learn with the top minds of the world. We get top colleges, just anyone, and top PhD grads. And we are being selective, and I almost feel bad. Would you turn down a PhD who's doing biomechanical science from this university? We have no choice. We can't have thousands, so we are selective. So yes, but not for, if somebody wants to go to a startup, then they will go to a startup. Somebody wants to work for a commercial economy that Google provides. Of course, we're not the first pick.
So this is fantastic. So now that you touched on the effort to do spinouts.
Yeah.
Talk about our latest work together with you.
Yeah.
This is one of your pet projects and babies coming out of Bell Labs. You've had other projects that have tried to be commercialized, but this one particularly holds a lot of promise. So talk about Astranu, the project that Celesta and Nokia are working together to spin out. So if you could elaborate on why you are excited about that technology.
So if you think about one of our largest and most successful labs is our optical lab. And optical lab produces, if you look at optics, coherent optics is one of the technology that is used standard. By the way, we hold several world records in optics.
And you have a lot of patents there,
We have loads of patents. And then you start to think about devices and optics together. And this set of team started thinking about imaging through tomography. And when they started looking at, this and the particular application we're talking about together here now that we have launched is actually really looking at the middle ear anatomy, right? And the way it says, the application was right in front of us, right? You could actually image much more efficiently with the low coherent light than the way it's being done today. And when we're imaging for comms, you could image it for healthcare as well. And when you can image for healthcare, today, when anybody goes for an ear scan, the scanner is huge, and the scanner itself costs $50,000 to $100,000. The insurance pays a lot out of this, for every scan. And we said we could build a laser that was a miniature size. We could build a whole system that could be handheld,
which is low power,
and hand it to just everybody. You don't have to have a full certification around running a big scanner. Here, do a scan. And we saw that application together with you, and we said, it's a field of use we will never be successful in. We're a comms company. But then we created a venture with you guys called Astranu. And I'm so happy and proud because it serves the purpose of Bell Labs. Right. Make the world better through cutting edge research. And it serves the purpose as a corporation to commercialize.
Well, this is fantastic because Celesta is all about, deep tech investing. And this is very unusual for us to get engaged in. But we're super happy and proud to be associated with you. But I want to go back to the application that you talked about, because you did make the comment that you're a mobile telecommunications company. But interestingly, there's lots of innovation that's going on in scanning and coherent tomography and optical coherent tomography as a field has tremendous potentials in healthcare, in diagnosis, and all of this. And there are applications of using your earphones or hearing aid to actually do diagnostics. So are those the sorts of applications that you're envisioning for what the first set of applications might be for this venture? How are you thinking about that?
Yes, that field of use is very exciting. I mean, the starting application is, of course, looking at the ear anatomy, but you could start thinking of other healthcare applications. You could use this technology for outside healthcare. There's imaging and scan analysis done in a multitude of industries. Where would you find light, low coherent light as a most efficient mechanism to do this? We've offered the world the technology. It's not carrying bits. It's giving you an imaging scan. Use it.
But talk about your venture business that you have, which is Nokia Growth Partners. And that's a separate, corporate venture activity. How does that fit into this overall strategy? When do you decide to invest in some of these projects? Because that is, as I understand it, that is 100% Nokia's money. You don't have other people's money on it, right? So talk about that.
We're 100% of the LP. It has, we're on the fifth fund now. And we've had this for now, 15 plus years, and we think of it as it's a strategic corporate VC. The amount of information and knowledge it gets to us, what's happening in different parts of the world for early stage, growth stage, we use it as a Horizon 2 and 3 vehicle. We don't just go invest in companies that we will eventually acquire. We invest in companies that either we can use for our products, we can use as a co-sell, we can sell to. So and if you look at what they invest in is, digital, 4.0, they invest in cyber, sat tech, and all of this Horizon 2 and 3 expands what Nokia is really looking at.
But you give them enough autonomy to go do the stuff, and you're really arm's length in a sense, right?
Yes. If you don't do that, you don't get the best partners. And I believe we have a fantastic team running it today.
Yeah, of course. And we work very closely with them as well. And this is very similar to some of the other guys that do it, Capital G, and you've got the Sapphire with SAP and Intel Capital and others as well.
Yes.
But do you see a scenario where you spin that out as a separate entity or bring other people's money inside that? Or is
There's
that
a lot of deliberation around all of that, has been for a long time. But for now, we're committed to the corporate VC model, where is less known. There's a lot of collaboration between Bell Labs and the VC. So we get a lot of inbound deals, and then they would basically say, what do you guys think when we actually plug in memory into compute like this? Is that silicon technology worth something?
Well, you have the best due diligence, resource that you can dream of.
Yes. Equally, when the Bell Labs guys, they go, see, we saw this Web 3.0 way to communicate, which is decentralized communications. This system that these guys have put together is kick-ass. And then they go raising. We say, hey, we want to invest. So that
it works both ways.
It works both ways.
Yeah. I mean, you look at, I think as a technologist, you couldn't have a better place than the seat that you're sitting in, which has access to all this technology. You can sort of see what's coming down the pike. You have the resources, and most importantly, you have the people and the hardcore scientists working on cutting edge stuff. So I truly think that you have one of the best jobs that I can think of in the industry.
It's exciting, really exciting. We call it the innovation framework, where we have Bell Labs on one quadrant, we have the venture capital on the internal incubator as a quadrant. And then what we also do is we also invest in fund of funds. And there we actually look at, it's called the innovation framework, which we believe is going to be a big engine for propelling Nokia forward.
You have an amazing job, and you have such a grasp of technology and the trends. And I think you have the resources to make some pretty amazing things to happen. And it's been a great pleasure for us to work with you in the context of Astranu, the spinout that we did, and hopefully we'll do a lot more. But before I finish, I have to ask you a bunch of, lightning round questions.
Okay.
Are you ready for
Rapid
that?
fire, yes.
Okay, rapid fire. Okay, so let's go for this. So, what technology excites you the most right now, besides telecom? Because I know, seeing some of the things that you are currently under wraps in Bell Labs, I know you have lots of interesting nuggets there. So what is the one that excites you?
My big bet is topological quantum computing. Yeah. Quantum computing, as many may have think that has existed recently, is a 100-year-old phenomenon. It was 100 years ago when in Solvay conference, quantum computing was accepted, and even before that by Schrodinger. I believe we have some of the best methodology to make this real in the next decade.
One leadership principle that you swear by?
You don't know what you don't know. Keep your mind open.
Great. Which other company, other than Nokia, of course, that you admire most for innovation, present or past? Doesn't matter.
I actually really think of the company that really I admire is the company that has democratized the world in terms of silicon is TSMC. It has created a digital economy. Without it, inventing something and industrializing it is completely different. I think what TSMC has been able to achieve, given the limited economy it came out of, it's not a big country, and what they have done to serve the world is just, it's going to have centuries of impact.
Stunning. What is the one piece of advice you would give any youngster, or perhaps yourself? You're young yourself, but if you were to start out in technology, what would you give that person an advice today, knowing what you know?
Be limitless. Don't create artificial limits. They're all in your brain.
Nishant, this has been such a pleasure talking to you. I can talk to you for a long time. You and I have lots of common interests, and we are both geeks at heart, and I know that you are a physicist in your heart as well, and you get enamored by all things that happen in Bell Labs. You can count me to that same list. So it's a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for taking the time and being on the podcast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to the TechSurge podcast from Celesta Capital. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it, subscribe, or leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform. We'll be back every 2 weeks with more insights and discussions of all things deep tech. Bye for now.